Okay. And you can take it away.
Sounds good. Well, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Cyrus Etemad-Moghadam. I'm a product development expert. My background is in mechanical engineering, but I've been involved with various product designs over the years. And I've worked with Henry Mortimer in the past to help with talk about what I know of, which is how to develop products. What we are as a company is we're a product development company. What that means that we take the ideas, concepts, and so on, and we innovate, we solve our customers' problems, we prototype and ultimately transition our customers' ideas into production, which is really what our customers are looking for. They're trying to make a product that does something different and in many cases changes the market. We have internal capabilities with system engineering, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering. We have industrial engineering in-house as well. We do software and firmware development, but also we do a lot of this prototyping. So we have a shop in the back where we can do all types of fabrication. And then we also support anything related to testing, certification, and fabrication. And by the way, if anybody is interested or has some questions, I'll gladly stop and answer questions. So basically, the design process is not as simple as a few arrows as I have them on the sketch, because it's very rare that you go through a whole design phase without having to go back and reiterate or do something different. But basically, before you start, you want to understand the market needs. So we always tell our customers, we want to make sure that they understand who their end customers are, what their customers want, that's the requirements. We often have customers that come to us with prototypes or concepts. It may just be an idea, or it may be something around something that already exists, but they want to improve on. And then obviously regulations are very important. So you have to certify the product. Do you have to be able to meet certain requirements? Does it have to have some safety requirements? So what we'll do is we'll take those requirements and we'll develop a concept. And that concept can include a variety of things. So for complex products, we have software, we have electronics. Very often we have to develop a system architecture. There's some partitioning that goes on. We refine the requirements. So someone comes to us and says, well, I want a car that goes fast. Well, what's fast? Is 120 miles an hour a minimum? Is it 50 miles an hour? So we try to refine those requirements. We often start early with risk assessments. You'll see that we've done a lot of work in medical devices. So there are situations in which a patient can die as a result of an issue with something that is developed or a process that is developed. We looked at technology assessments. We also spend a lot of time on the user experience, the user interface, how they use the device. Industrial design is a variety of things. Among other things, we also look at cosmetics, right? How something looks, because more often than not, people that are turned away because something doesn't look nice. IP search and simulation and so on. Once that is well situated, we can go into the detailed design, and I'll go over the examples of detailed design. Prototyping, validation, and production. What happens a lot more often than not is we tend to go back because we've done a concept review and we go over the design with potentially users or customers, end users, and they may say, well, really, we don't like this, we'd rather have that. Same thing in design phase, same thing in prototyping. We can go back and adjust, to meet all the requirements. So a lot of people talk about, software development being so easy because you can just have a low cost investment with a computer, maybe a corner in a room, and that's sufficient for developing hardware, things that we do, the things that are physical that you hold in your hands. That requires much larger investments. So you need a team of experts, you need equipment to be able to handle all this. That could be, you can see on the slides here, Oops, sorry, hopefully the control. You'll see we have heavy equipment for fabrication. We've got space for all of our prototypes, test equipment, a lot of simple tools, more complicated tools. You can see a bunch of 3D printers here. And then at the bottom is a CNC. So, you know, in an environment where all you're doing is software development, you don't need a lot of space, as you can see here. And that is my team. So developing hardware is not easy. It takes time and it takes quite a lot of investment. So the first thing that we do, as I mentioned, is product definition. And before we take on a project, we typically ask our customers, especially the ones that come with very little funding, what do you understand the market you want to sell into? So everything that's in blue is basically what we don't do. We're not very good in marketing or sales. That's not our area of expertise. But we do work with our customers to make sure that they understand what their market is. Can they sell the product? Do they understand who the competition is? Have they looked into intellectual property? How will they sell this product? Once that is defined, then it's a great time to get us involved. We can help with the product definition, proof of concept. We can develop the overall system, as I mentioned before. So on the slide here, the image on the left is kind of comical when we're playing and having a little bit of fun, but we actually had someone come to us with a specific application related to a tent. And they said, this tent is a one-man tent. And we started working with it. And the reality is, it wasn't. It just wasn't an option. The other thing I'm showing on this page are things with the user interface. As I mentioned, it's so important when you're working with a device that it's usable by the customer. How many times have you downloaded an app on your phone, used it for 5 minutes and just hated it and stopped using it? That is part of the user experience. If you don't make it work correctly, it's just not going to be used. So what's really important is you want to plan. That's the most important part. It's just key. Because if you don't plan now, you're going to pay for it later. And that's just the reality of it. So I always tell people, spend as much time up front as you can, pay up front, otherwise you're going to be paying a whole lot more later. So this is like the core of what we do, the detailed design. We take the ideas, the concepts, we make prototypes, we design things. This is an example of an unusual angled screw drive. We have, where's the screw drive? Here we go. Sorry. Board layout. This is laying out PC boards. This is a circuit board, just like the ones you have on your computers and your phone. Putting prototypes together, testing. This is an example of a very early test where we used a potato gun to see if a centrifuge failure would result in the cowling that protects it from getting damaged, because again, this is part of the risk assessment. We'll do CAD design. This is interpretation, CAD interpretation of an actual final design. Once the prototyping has been done, the next step is we get into the documentation. So detailed design, prototyping, and again, after some tweaks, we can go back to it and do the documentation. That documentation can be used to produce parts. The testing part is important as well, because you have to verify that the design works. You have to verify that your estimations are all within the expected ability of meeting requirements. There may be some early qualification testing. Say, for example, there's a big concern that you're going to have an issue with maybe a voltage breakdown when you have a high voltage circuit. You can test that before going through spending a lot of money on the actual certification. And then we'll help. We don't do marketing, but we'll help getting marketing materials and IP and things like that together. So the next step is transition to production. Just the whole reason the effort is being done is because ultimately you want to be able to profit from the investment you've made in developing a product. So these include sourcing. sourcing custom manufacturers for certain parts or assemblies. It could include distributors. If anybody's worked on any project recently that required certain parts, you probably know that there's a lot of components not available. So all of these connections are important. Contract manufacturers are the people that take your assembly, your idea, your documentation, and put it together, and they test it. There's also a decision that has to be made by the company whether they want to build that themselves or they want to buy these things, whether they're sub-assemblies. For example, circuit boards require a lot of equipment, but assembling circuit boards inside a mechanical enclosure, like the one you see here, is right here, is very simple. It doesn't require the same kind of equipment. It requires expertise, but not the equipment. You need tooling. The parts here are examples of an assembly that we broke down. This was an internal design effort that we were just having fun with. It shows you the parts are involved. We have to find vendors that make these parts. If you're making mass-produced parts, you may need to select a specific process. It could be a process by which you mold parts, and so you need a tool. There's a lot of non-recurring engineering costs. That's what NREs are. Like a PC board. If you buy a PC board, you've got to pay for the tooling for it. You got to pay for the programming. You may have some test sets as well. Once those parts have gone through everything, we typically will look at the first pieces of a production part. So say, for example, you designed a case for a phone, for example. So this is part of an auto box. I think we can see it. When the part, we've designed the part in a certain way, once it comes out of the tool, we have to make sure that it actually meets our requirements. The other item that's important is packaging. So especially on consumer products, when you're shipping parts, you don't want them to be broken, damaged. There's always a risk on that. And so the marketing people will get involved. You know, this is, we'd like things to look a certain way or have certain colors, but obviously you also have to engineer the packaging so things don't break. So Apple is a great company. You know, a good example of, you open the box, it's really stylish and everything's in the right place. You could probably drive a tank over those boxes and they wouldn't break. And then finally, the testing. So as I mentioned, you have to do some testing throughout the development process, but at the end, you still want to test everything. Certification are things where there's a test that is performed that meets a certain standard. So UL is typically safety. CSA is the same kind of safety type of requirements, but they're in England. I'm sorry, no, in Canada. Sorry about that. CE is a European Community certification, FDA, and whatever standard applies to your industry. There are standards in just about every industry you can think of, including the toy industry. There may be a qualification requirement in the military world. That's what they call them. So a mil standard of some kind. There's always testing that you want to do. So basically, initially you do some testing on 100%, but you may reduce that to a lot test. The other tests are a little bit different, are not always required, but we perform them more often than not, and that is accelerated testing. So that's reliability. If you're going through and want to know that, say, for example, you have a bearing on a wheel or a shaft, you want to know that that bearing is going to survive the expected life. And then destructive, that's going the extra step. All of this is part of the process. Are there any questions so far? And I'm going a little fast, but I want to give some time for specific projects if there are any questions. Great. So once the project is done, the next step is it's in production. This is where the mass production happens. Mass production can be hundreds, thousands, millions. More often than not, the customers we work with tend to be smaller. They don't have their own manufacturing, but there are plenty of companies out there that have manufacturing. For example, Stanley Black & Decker in town has multiple manufacturing facilities in Maryland. as well as offshore. But smaller businesses may not want to set up a line. You have to manage inventory. You have to do a lot of production testing. There's also everything related to packaging and all of the logistics of inventory of final assembly, as well as logistics of shipping them. And again, that's why a lot of companies typically will use an outside source. The image in the center is a contract manufacturer that does circuit boards and box builds. You can see the amount of space, you can see the amount of equipment that's necessary. The one below is actually at our office where we assembled, I think, 50 or 60 of these units for a specific customer because they wanted to. Typically don't do a lot of manufacturing, but we'll build some quantities. And really the idea is that it's time to make money. That's why you've done it. That's the basic cycle. As I mentioned, a lot of reiteration, 2, 3, 4 years into a production cycle, a customer may call us and go, hey, product is great. We want to add this capability. We want to add Bluetooth. We want to go from a regular screen to a touch screen. And those are things that can be done, later on. But really what you're looking for is to try to basically make a profit on the product you're selling. So I get questions sometimes, when should you involve a product development company? So typical product, large companies know when they have the capabilities in-house or not, but smaller businesses, especially startups, are not always sure of when to do that. So what I'll say is, if you're lacking the internal skills, that's a great time to do it. Anybody can learn how to do certain things, but you don't want to spend time learning things if the core of your business is really a specific technology that you're trying to develop. Once there's a proof of concept, that's really nice because you know that it works, and now you're ready to go to a full industrialization of the product. When time is of the essence, and I mentioned that a couple of different places, all engineers and scientists, and then there's a lot of people there without technical degrees that are capable of doing just about anything. The problem is there's a learning curve to get there. So what you don't want to do is be in a situation where what should have taken an hour or two takes you 4 or 5 days, and another task takes another 4 or 5 days, and you're spending a lot of time learning a lot, and I'm sure having a lot of fun with it. I love to learn things that I have nothing to do with my technical expertise, but it's a waste of time because typically time to market is so important. The other thing I'll mention is it's also very difficult to hire a team, train them, put them together, getting the right kind of culture going, all the processes in place. More often than not, having an external team makes those things a lot faster. Quality product is important. We can all make things. I hack things at home all the time, and they work, but they don't look very pretty. So there may be a need for showing a finished product to a potential user, buyer, or a venture capitalist investor. Obviously, when you can't do things in-house, sometimes things are just too complicated or require multiple disciplines. And that's a big one. We have in-house all of the capabilities. We rarely outsource anything, and anything we outsource is a very small number of individuals in our network that we've been working with and are comfortable with. And more importantly than not, when a product is ready for production. Because printing a part, using manual assembly to put components on or cut things or assemble things, it's just going to take too much time. It's going to be too expensive if you're trying to sell a lot of products. So that's the right time to engage people. I mentioned we do a lot of work in the healthcare world. These are examples of things we've worked on. Someone asked me not too long ago when I was making a similar presentation, how long are our customer engagements? They can be anywhere from 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks to years. One of the customers on this page we've been working with for 10 years. That's because there was about 4 years of proof of concept phase, a year of raising funds, and then once they were ready, we're ready to do a full product development. We've got diagnostics equipment here, and we've got consumables. Those are the things that you throw away after you use them. And then this is a bigger smattering of components. So this one we're pretty proud of. It's called a Wolf Pack. It's for K9 units, so military, rescue, law enforcement. It goes on the back of a dog and has cameras. What already exists today is goes right on top of the dog's spine. It's extremely uncomfortable, very heavy. So we actually made this, and we had Malinois, which are typical law enforcement dogs, tried to break them and weren't able to break them. So that was pretty cool. But communication devices, we mentioned UL. This is a UL certified device for power controls. We've got some very simple components. This is for medical application to hold tubes in place. We've done work for NASA. This was a sampling kit for the space station. And then you can also see a couple of consumer products. So that's it. That's what the product development is. I will tell people that start a business, like I said, start first with understanding what your market is, what you're trying to do, who you're trying to sell to, and how you're going to sell. Because you can develop the coolest product ever, but it'll never sell if either you don't have the distribution channels, or if you've designed something that's very cool, but no one's really willing to pay for it. There's a case, if anybody knows it, way before the iPod and the smartphones, that Apple developed a device called the Newton. It was the coolest thing ever. I got to play with one. It was pretty neat, but it just wasn't the market wasn't ready for it. So that's a product development. And then the last thing I'll say is RPM Tech is a 15-year-old company, and I'll tell any entrepreneur who expects to quickly become successful and make a bunch of money and be a billionaire like Mark Zuckerberg, it takes forever to get your product to the right place. You measure success in decades. So I'll tell people, just be patient and be willing to admit that your product is not exactly the right one, and pivot to something that you think someone will be interested in. So I tried to go fast so we can talk about, if you have any questions, is there anything I can answer?
There's no comments, but I do have a question. So you were saying it pretty much took 15 years and to never start, like just never expect to have your business just have like a lot of money and everything. So what was, because the whole COVID and everything and just your experience in general, in those times where you felt like your business wasn't going the way you thought it was going to go, like you were going to get a lot of money, what did you do in those situations?
Sure. So we had customers, and we had also ourselves seen big changes in the financial markets. And usually that's how the business, the projects are funded. We've had customers, even just recently, that had to put their projects on pause because of the economy, because of the war in Ukraine, so a lot of concerns. The first thing I would say is make sure you save enough money for those rainy days. And you need to keep your head down and focus on what's important. Make sure you keep all your customers happy. In our case, we're in the services world. But if you're in the market of selling products, make sure that those products are well positioned for that market, and plan for it. If it's a place where the market dries out very quickly for whatever reason, be ready to refocus on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There's no questions. I can put my email address. I don't know, or maybe I don't know if you can put the email address in in the comments list, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I'll gladly help you guys out.
You could put in the email address, yeah. Or do you want me to do that?
How about I do it? So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. I don't remember how it is. Stop sharing, and then I didn't have the whole thing, so I'll put my email address right here. There you go.
Thank you. I know
Sounds
our,
good.
yeah,
Okay.
sounds great. I know our e-fellows will have a lot of questions. They weren't able to come today, but with the recording, I'll make sure to like send your email and also for them to watch this.
Sounds great. And I do like Eric's think about things differently. I do believe, and I tell my colleagues all the time to think out of the box. Kind of like that saying. Well, it's good to see everyone. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.